Tyrre Burks is the founder and CEO of Players Health. Players Health is on a mission to create the safest and most successful environments possible for kids to play the sports they love by providing innovative and connected athlete safety and insurance products and services to the youth sports market. Tyrre, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Dan, man. How you doing? Really appreciate you having me. Super excited to be here.
Doing all right. I think last time I saw you, we were in Minneapolis, your town, for the On-Ramp conference.
We were, yeah. That panel was awesome. Also, just a lot of things that I've learned, but also really excited to be on that panel as well. So thanks for having me back. But yeah, really, that definitely was a cool event that we were at.
Yep. And I think for anyone who missed it, and this is going to be out, I believe, by ITC, hopefully. But join us at the ITC panel on the 20th, 2:15 p.m. for the Socotra workshop is going to have Tyrre there, again, talking about your journey, which we're going to get into here as well a bit. So first off, so Players Health is a lot more than insurance, although obviously we're focused on insurance here. Could you have kind of the broad scope of, we've heard the mission from the intro here, but make it real for us. What are you doing?
Absolutely. And so I'll talk a bit about kind of how we got going into this, but it'll frame up kind of really what we're doing. But when you look at youth sports and how kids are playing sports, most kids just want to play. And what we've identified, and I think what I've identified in starting Players Health is that, the health and safety of an athlete has not changed very much since I last played. So when we think about policies and protocols around how we manage injuries, when we think about abuse prevention, I think one of the things that we're tired of seeing in Players Health is we're tired of seeing the headlines. I think we've gotten to the point where the headlines are so frequent around abuse in sport, around altercation between a parent and a ref, or very serious or catastrophic injury. We're seeing these incidents so frequently, they're not as shocking to us as they used to be. And I think our focus at Players Health is to provide sports organizations with the tools and resources to mitigate risk and also support them economically with making sure that they save money on their largest expense, which happens to be their property and casualty insurance. And so I think at its core, we are focused on supporting organizations with creating that safer environment, and all the technology and resources that we provide help them do that on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. Great. So how did you get it into insurance? Because you're doing a much broader scope here. Let's focus on the non-insurance part. Then of course we're going to talk a little bit more about insurance. Like what is the experience like? What do you provide? How do you help? How do you move that mission along?
Absolutely. And so me getting into insurance was definitely a roundabout way. We started as a risk management company. So Players Health have been around for about 7 years. Prior to starting Players Health, I was playing in the Canadian Football League, where I played wide receiver. I had a ton of injuries throughout my entire career. I have 3 bulging discs in my neck. I ended up tearing my hamstring off my tibia. And when I hung it up, I started volunteering. I started coaching my son's team. He's 16 now. At the time, he was 9. And I started to see how organizations were struggling to create that safer environment. So when it came to injuries, for example, and that's how we started, we created an injury management platform for sports organizations. Well, how does that play out in real life? A kid gets hurt. Say they have a head injury, for example. There are laws that require sports organizations to manage a head injury in a very specific way. One, it should be documented. We need to collect a medical clearance before we return an athlete back to play. Our system just ensures that those policies and that protocol is followed. So we're making sure that not only did we document that this incident happened, and then we're making sure that we have the proper prerequisites before that athlete is returned back to play. That was how we started the company, and building kind of an electronic medical record for athletes. I think quickly we realized that injuries weren't the only thing that these sports organizations needed to manage in terms of risk. And USA Gymnastics, Penn State, that was front and center for us at that time. And what we recognized is that a lot of organizations struggle with managing incidents. So how were incidents being reported? And then the organization itself was still following up on those incidents. We saw this as a really big problem. So if I have an incident reported by an athlete about a coach and I'm an administrator, the likelihood that I know that coach personally is very high. Am I going to treat that coach in a very unbiased way? I have bias against that coach because I know them. And so we created an incident reporting software that allowed any athlete, coach, or parent to anonymously or privately report an abuse incident.
Yeah.
And then that led us into actually managing the investigations on behalf of the organization. And so there was a slow progression where we started to think about risk management more holistically. It wasn't just an injury or it wasn't just abuse. We started thinking about all of the resources and services these organizations needed to follow. And the legislation was driving us in that. So there are specific laws around head injuries. There are specific laws around education and training for coaches. There are specific laws around how they manage abuse. So we created a platform to help them manage that. That was the first 3.5, 4 years of Players Health.
Yeah, because I was thinking they're likely to know the coach. They're not likely to know the local laws and what they're required to do. They might not do enough or do the wrong thing. And a really interesting point, I remember when we first met in Minneapolis, it's almost a year ago now, you were also talking about the case of children who play more than one sport.
Right.
So they may have a head injury in one sport that means that they can't do anything for a while playing football, but then the hockey coach doesn't know and sends them out on the ice.
Absolutely. And these things happen all the time. Think about how many sports kids play. On average, kids are playing anywhere between 2.3 sports a year. And they're playing all year round now. And so making sure that there is clear communication, transparency around how we're managing health and safety of the athlete is really important. And then when you think about it, when we first started this, we had a couple hundred sports organizations at that time. As we continue to grow our services, the number of clients we supported, we started to collect massive amounts of data. And so in the past 7 years, we've documented over 106,000 incidents and injuries that we are managing. And so just think about the incidents and the information that we have on injuries, on abuse, that really help us get a better sense around what is a good organization in terms of how they manage their risk and who's a bad organization in terms of that they need help and support to kind of rehab the program, so to speak.
And then that's across, I'm in the U.S. and you're now in Canada.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we support over 50,000 sports organizations in both U.S. and Canada, all sports. So there's not one sport that we're not currently, whether it be, water ski and wakeboarding, whether it be snowboarding or football and your big ball sports, baseball, basketball, things like that.
Well, I suppose the laws don't care.
Oh,
Concussion's a concussion. Doesn't matter if you fell off a balance beam or got tackled.
100%. And I think when you think about kind of how this company has progressed, how we got into insurance was we started to collect all of this information and we started to connect with a number of insurers. Now, those insurers have a loss control fee that they pay for risk management, for some type of technology or information that organizations could use to help mitigate risk. Well, we started in the insurance industry by leveraging our technology at no cost to the client, and we take a loss control fee anywhere between 2 and 5% of the premium. That was my first introduction into insurance, where we realized that sports organizations don't spend thousands of dollars on risk management. They're very cash strapped. So how can we find an organization that needs the information that we're aggregating, but would also be willing to pay for it? And the insurance carriers was the way that we thought that would be the best. And we started to grow very quickly in that a large number of our carriers wanted to implement our technology.
Now, where along the line of the company was that? I mean, you've been running for 8 years now?
Yeah, we're rounding up to our 8th year now. And that was probably about 4.5 years ago.
Okay. So the first half of the company, you weren't thinking about insurance at all. You're thinking about...
It was the furthest thing from our minds, honestly.
Yeah. Well, you're not the first one to settle to do something else and end up in insurance. I think that you've been around the industry a few years now. You've seen that's a common story, I'm sure.
And I think that's the biggest differentiator. Had we started with a brokerage or MGA in the beginning and then tried to build risk services afterwards, it would have been extremely hard to do because we would have had to do something that it's really hard for us to do in insurance is we have to start shaving margin. So you have to build technology, increase your cost so that you can have those services. Fortunately, we built that foundation first. And then the funding mechanism, which is what we call the insurance, is what we added afterwards. And so we set up our brokerage. And then from there, we did our brokerage our first year. We did about $1 million in premium. We set up the MGA in year 2. Through the MGA in the brokerage, we did about 7 million. And then this year, we're rounding at about 35 to 40 million this year.
Oh, wow. It's nice growth. And of course, we're on the tech side, and full disclosure, Players Health is a customer of Socotra's. How's the tech evolution gone? Because your needs are pretty simple at the beginning. You're just dipping a toe.
Correct.
And now you're full on deployed internationally. Tell us about that journey.
Well, I think the biggest learnings that we had was that I'm happy that we didn't start technology and build out the platform on our own day one. We would have wasted a ton of money along the way. When it came to setting up our MGA and building out kind of our policy admin system, we went manual in the beginning. And this was something I shared on our panel that when we were on the panel at OnRamp, was because we didn't know anything, we knew very little about insurance at that time. We started to focus on some of the large organizations. So our average premium was north of 100K that we were focused on, but it allowed us to be able to manually, provide those policies. I think there's a bunch of things that we learned through doing it manually that allowed us to be able to have really clear requirements around what we needed from a technology perspective to scale. And so that was how we started. We went after, one of our first big account, that $1 million account, 800K of that was one client. And so it was, and then we had probably about a couple hundred small policies that made up the other 200K. And so I think we went bigger in the beginning, had a really clear understanding around what we needed to build. And so when we did connect with you guys, we were able to move a lot faster because we weren't trying to figure it out. We knew exactly what we needed, and you guys were able to move quick enough so that we can get to market quicker.
Yeah, and we see the whole range. We see folks like yourselves who have done it manually and they know what they want. And then there are ones that don't want to build it more than once, so they want to jump straight to the full solution, but then they've got some figuring out along the way. So it kind of definitely seen it both ways. Your approach certainly makes it easier for us when someone knows what they want, but we do work with it both ways. I do know that from our side, or I should say just in general, I tell my team before you automate anything, do it manually 3 times.
Love it.
Because that manual work is where you learn so much. Sometimes what you learn is the thing you think you have to automate because you're going to do it all the time. You actually don't end up doing that much. And then something else, you end up, spin the automation somewhere else. You know where the gains are going to be. There's so much you don't know until you do it.
Yeah, and I think as you get to market with your digital solution, you now understand there's trade-offs. You can figure out what you want to automate in the beginning, and then maybe for the MVP, these aren't things you've made a decision not to automate. They're going to be manual in the beginning, and then you're going to get more efficient as you go, as you get to more scale. So now that we have thousands of these organizations buying policies, of course we need more automation. But in the beginning, it was okay for us to not have everything automated in the initial launch.
Yeah. I know we've had clients who there's some element, some process that they're convinced day one, this has to be automated. And they'll let it slide till after launch, do it manually. Of course, they can automate at any time, open APIs and so forth. But then sometimes they find they make it surprisingly far without that automation. Maybe it's 2-3 years later, and that thing that had to be automated day one, they're like, well, maybe this only comes up once every 6 weeks and someone spends 20 minutes on it and it's done. You have to do a whole lot of that to justify even spending one engineer for a week building the automation.
Absolutely. I can give you an example of it happening in the reverse for us. We assumed that we could manually do our COIs in the beginning. We didn't anticipate for us to have a massive summer in our first year. We had to issue over 14,000 COIs, and we did it manually in that first year. It was the most painful 60 days of our lives. And then, of course, we built an automated portal specifically for these sports organizations to go in, get their COIs. And then, of course, now it's completely streamlined and no one needs to touch it. But super painful of learning that in the reverse.
Yeah. And in some context, COI, I assume that's certificate of insurance, and that's something the organization has to do in order to do sports, in order to
to rent their court, field, or ice. And that was one of the biggest things that we learned, in that I can sell for a league. I may have 20 local clubs as a part of that league. And yes, we sold the policy to the league, but we realized that every club may have 5 or 6 different COIs that they need, or certificates of insurance that they need to rent their field or to travel to this tournament or whatever they need to go. So that one organization could have 100 COIs that we have to issue. And then, of course, when you have thousands of them, it aggregates pretty quickly. And so definitely something we learned. And there's always going to be some of those kind of manual versus automations in the beginning that you either get right and it helps you be more efficient so you can grow faster, or you get wrong and you're going to have to figure out and build the plane as you're flying it at the same time.
Yeah. Right. Then let's see. So focus primarily is on youth, but there are a lot of adult sports leagues, so forth, bowling leagues, softball, things like that. Thoughts on that, getting into that? Have you gotten into that?
We have. I think when you look at what we're providing with Players Health, think amateur on down. So everything but professional sports is really where we are supporting the market. And so we have a large number of, think about your tackle, semi-pro leagues or something like that. These are organizations we would definitely write. We just bought a big K through 12 MGA, and we're now supporting a number of K through 12 organizations specifically on their student accident and their secondary insurance, specifically around sports. And then fitness is also a big market for us that we're growing. And so when we look at an athlete, we're thinking about all that.
Fitness?
We do all the properties.
Besides sports.
Absolutely. Well, we do fitness, or Orange Theories, punches, your anytime fitness. So if you're a boutique fitness club, we write a lot of those, hundreds of them. And so the fitness, we launched the fitness arm of our business earlier this year. I think it was like January, February. And we've been able to make really good headway in that market over the course of the past few months here.
Okay. That's a good one. Because there's a ton of these small gyms, especially now because you've got, now you've got CrossFit gyms, but that was 10 years ago. I don't know what the latest is, but these things pop up. Yoga studios, CrossFit, a lot of non-traditional gyms.
Absolutely.
I should call them gyms. Yeah, clubs.
They're clubs, they're boutiques. And I think one of the things that is a big misconception with our business is that a lot of people assume that we had this small TAM, a total addressable market, for context, and that you think youth sports, but when you think about amateur sports and fitness, like this niche is almost like a super niche. There are hundreds of thousands of small businesses that we have the opportunity to support that generate, anywhere between $8 to $12 billion of premium. And then if you add other lines of business that we now starting to support, like employee benefits, the TAM is dramatically larger. And so the opportunity for us is big, but it's a niche. It's really sports and fitness is really where we want to own the space. Both here, US and Canada, we want to be a global partner in this.
So you get into employee benefits and such, so you can be a one-stop shop for like the fitness center, fitness club.
Absolutely. So we just bought an employee benefits broker that focused on employees, organizations that have employees of 50 W-2s or less. That's a sweet spot for us because most of your boutique clubs, don't have more than 20 W-2s. And then when you think about sports, youth sports, amateur sports, they may not have more than 5 to 10 W-2s. but that's the sweet spot. No
Yeah.
one's focused on them. When you think about large employee benefits broker, they're not getting out of bed for anything less than 50 to 100 W-2s. But when you have thousands of those organizations the way we do, you can roll up that market pretty quickly, and it becomes economies of scales. And you end up having instead of doing if you got 5,000 organizations that have five W-2s, you got 25,000 lives. That is a pretty big book of business on the employee benefit side, but we're adding a ton of value for a demographic that has almost been ignored in this space.
Okay. And I was also curious about the size of these, because you talk about size of W-2s. I was a little surprised earlier when we were talking about the size of premiums. You're talking six-figure premiums. So this isn't going to be like a single sports team. This is going to be like the whole league. Or who do you normally deal with in a sale when you're dealing with youth sports?
Absolutely. So we have our company, the way that we look at kind of our demographics, it's kind of three segments. We have what is called custom accounts. Those are large deals. Those are your USA Boxings, USA Swimming, USA Gymnastics. So large national organizations, US Youth Soccer, things like that. And then we have what it is like our small business. And those are organizations that are 15K or less. And so think about your Pop Warner Club, your travel volleyball program. There are hundreds of thousands of those organizations. And then, of course, we have K through 12, which is a different demographic that, think about your private school, your public school district. These are all the organizations that we are now supporting. And then, of course, fitness, I've described specifically around your boutiques. We're not riding Lifetime. We're riding small CrossFit gyms. We're riding F45s. Your Orange Theories and things like that. Those are the organizations that, on average, their premium is about $5,000 to $10,000, and we're rolling up that market.
Okay, then let's see. Let's heading back to the beginning. We talked about how you, for first half of the company, you weren't thinking of insurance. How did you get started in the first place? I mean, you're a former professional athlete yourself, Canadian League receiver, I recall.
I was, yeah, wide receiver. I was playing for the Saskatchewan Roughriders at the time, yeah.
Yeah. And how'd you go from that to starting this business? What was in between?
That's actually a really interesting story. I think I had already started to take some MBA courses at the time. So my rookie contract in the CFL was like $45,000 Canadian. So I wasn't making a lot of money. I always tell people I spent more money trying to play professional football than I made playing football. But I was a no-name. I went to a small Division II university, Winona State, here in Minnesota. And because I was tall, I'm 6'5", I was fast. I ran a 4.3 40.
Yeah, you're pretty nice 40, I recall. You said.
Exactly. I had an opportunity to play because you can't not give a 6'5" receiver that runs a 4.3 40 a shot. So because of my upside, I had an opportunity to play at the next level. I came out of the draft and I ended up going to Europe. I played in Germany for a year, and then I played in the Canadian Football League on and off, practice squad, things like that for about 2 to 3 years. And so I think coming out of that experience, I had this idea of wanting to start this company specifically around injury management in sport and like team communication. I just tore my hamstring off my tibia, and I called my sports agent, and I'm like, hey, I'm not going back. I was supposed to go back to camp. I mean, not to camp. We were on a bye week. I was supposed to go back in on Monday. I had my flight to go back, and I'm like, hey, I want to start this company. And he's like, Ty, you're 24. You're in the best shape of your life. Like, you shouldn't do this. And he was trying to convince me to stay. So I told him I was convinced. I'm like, hey, I'm done. And he was like, well, tell me about the business. He's like frustrated. And I tell him, and he was my first investor. So I put my own money in. And he matched me for my. I put $80K of my own cash in to build the MVP for the application that I wanted to create, and he matched me. And he was He was the first believer, my first investor, and really that's what got me into the game. And I had someone that believed in me early on, saw that I was committed to this, and gave me the support I need to walk away from being just an athlete, which was how I identified myself, to now thinking about what the possibilities could be of me being an entrepreneur would look like, basically.
That's amazing. I mean, that's a different world. How did you learn the million things you need to know to be a startup founder? Like you must have gotten some
a million mistakes.
Tell me. I don't even know where to begin asking.
I made so many mistakes. I'll share a quick story about my first 6 months into the business. So I shared with you, I had this capital that I raised along with my own capital to build the MVP. So I got this quote from a development shop, about $75K to build the MVP. Well, 10 weeks into the project, they reached back out to me, Ty, I think we underquoted you. It's actually going to be 150K. And I pay it, thinking, hey, this is okay. Maybe I didn't have everything documented. And I still didn't get to a finished product. That was my first 6 months into the business of building out an application. And that forced me to learn a ton. I learned how to code a little bit. Of course, I learned CSS and HTML. I learned how to filter through bullshit. And it allowed me to be able to kind of think on my feet. But that was my first 6 months in entrepreneurship. And that lesson really forced me to start to kind of be more hands-on and not just assume what I was being told was true.
Yeah. Well, that approach to IT will take you far. I wish we saw a little more of that skepticism out there for such things, because these overruns can just keep running and running and, we're working on it. We see that a lot. So, how about like hiring people, fundraising, venture? How did you learn?
So that's the part about my career I think that I actually do well at. I'm a people person, so I know people, and fundraising has never been that complicated for me in the sense that I believe in what I'm doing. I'm gonna be open about what I know and what I don't know, and this is only the beginning. And so every person that I come in contact with, they know that I am so committed on this that I'm gonna figure it out. And so either they invest now or they'll invest later when it's a lot more expensive and the company's further along. So fortunately, I've been able to build relationships with individuals that believe in me as an individual, and then using that credibility and my integrity to continue to build and kind of pivot along the way. I'll never give up. And I think that's what every investor that comes in contact, they see that this is more than just me trying to make money. There's a mission that I'm focused on here. And so it has bode well for me on that. And then me being an athlete, I can get into a lot of rooms that most people can't. And that has also helped me from a fundraising perspective. On the same coin of that, hiring, I think everyone that I come in contact with also see how committed I am on solving what is a massive issue in safety in sport. Like the headlines are there. There's not 1 week that doesn't go by that I don't see a headline of something happening in youth sports that we could support. And so one of the things that we do in our company on our all hands on Friday is at the end of the day, at the end of our call, one person, if they have an example, give an example of why we do what we do. Like what is happening in the market that says, hey, had we been involved, that probably wouldn't have happened, or we would have been able to impact it. Every week, there's an example. And so I connect with individuals that see the vision of what we want to do, of what we want to provide, which is creating a safer environment. And they've either personally dealt with some of the issues from an athlete perspective, or they have kids that they want to make sure has a better experience when it comes to sports. So sports is sexy, but I think the problem we're dealing with is a massive problem. And I think we're taking an out of a box approach to solving what those problems look like. Insurance, I don't lead with insurance. If I did, no one would come and work for us. But when it's sports in the context of how we're using insurance to fulfill our mission, dramatically different response, and allows everyone to think about the possibilities. And I love insurance. I think I'm a rare in that I love what insurance, it was built on a social good.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do within Players Health. And is how can we bring positivity back to what an insurance company provides for sports? Because without insurance, there's not one kid on a court field or ice playing any sport without insurance.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to bring a different perspective of how insurance companies are being viewed by our approach around thinking about their health and safety first.
Yeah. I think the industry, I mean, you implied it there. I think the industry needs more mission-driven messaging. I mean, insurance is a thing that is there for you when every other institution is just like, I got nothing, sorry. It's I mean, you'll make fun of the ads where like the branch falls on the house or the person gets sick but that stuff's real. That stuff's real. And it's a thing that's there when you've got nothing else sometimes, is that check to help you with whatever needs to happen next. Or in the case of sports, it's the thing that allows the parents to feel safe to have the kid there, to know that it's going to be okay.
Absolutely. And I think it just comes down to alignment. When we talk about insurance yes, we talk about, the tree falling on the house and things like that. But I think what's more impactful is when you provide a real life solution, a real life scenario of how something happened and that claim was paid out. Like I always tell people about my mother's story. My mom, she passed away. 2 weeks before she passed away, she got a life insurance policy. That policy went active a week before she passed, and the claim was paid. No, we don't tell those stories when in insurance. Like those are the kind of stories that we should tell to put a different lens on the big bad insurance companies. But it goes when you need it, like you value that you actually that you got it. And I think yes, there's definitely some messaging that we could do specifically around the services that we're providing.
Also, I'm thinking that you're also hinting at it's not just being there when something goes wrong. And we live in a litigious world.
Correct.
We do, and it has enabled a lot of economic good and so forth by having all these rules and whatnot. It's not just being there to make the payment when something bad happens. It's also covering the risk so that you're allowed to participate in the first place. So it's not just, it'll pay the check when something happens to my car, but it's the ability to drive a car in the first place, knowing that if it were to happen, I wouldn't be able to drive.
100%.
Kids wouldn't be able to play sports.
We talk about that.
A bunch of kids running around on a field doing dangerous things.
And I think more specifically in our use case, when we sit down with an organization, insurance is not something these organizations debate about having. They all know they need it.
Yeah.
I think the way that we are supporting them is that I want to make sure that with our services, they never need to use it. And whenever insurance is being used in sports, it's life-changing. Like it's going to be life-changing. And it could be in a bad way. It could be catastrophic. Last year we had an athlete pass away, and every time you get those kind of claims, you think about life dramatically different. And I think when we think about claims in our industry, specifically around kids, it's going to impact that kid, and making sure that experience, making sure that we make sure that those incidents don't happen is our number one priority. So yes, you have to buy insurance. What can we do ahead of time? How can we be proactive to make sure that we never have to use this insurance? Because I guarantee you, if you have to file a claim, we're all going to be sitting around going, we wish we would have done something to prevent it, especially when it comes to kids. And so I think when we would sit down with our organizations, our hope is that they never have to file a claim with us. And then we're focused on all of the things we can do pre-claim to make sure that we mitigate the likelihood of these incidents happening.
So those things, I mean, you're talking about kind of this medical records sort of thing. And we can get into, actually, I'm curious how you got to deal with HIPAA and things like that then, I presume. But what's the full list? Like, how do you prevent claims? How do you make the kids safer? We talked about if the kid has a slight injury, making sure that they have their recovery time. Covered that. What other things do you provide?
So there's a couple things we do. I'll just take you through a day in the life of an organization. The first thing we do in an organization is they go through a safety assessment. It's a 15-question survey. It's yes or no. Mm-hmm. And we start with policies and protocols. And that's where everything starts. When you have with youth sports, we are literally in the Wild Wild West. Like, just think about a kid getting hit, beamed in the head with a ball, and like the lack of medical resources we have. Like, there's just a bunch of parents corralling around it. But when incidents do happen, if we have the right policies and protocols and everyone is educated on it, we can respond appropriately. So we start with getting a health assessment of what policies and protocols do they have in place. Let's make sure that those are updated first. And then everyone wants to run straight to the technology. The organization's not ready for the technology until that foundation is laid.
Yeah.
And once we've educated the staff and the team on the policies and protocols, then we implement the technology. So we implement the incident reporting specifically around abuse. Now, say we don't do that. Say we don't focus on policies and protocols, and I just implement the technology. When an incident happens, no one will know what to do, and we're actually opening the organization up for more liability. It's important that that foundation is laid. Once we have the policies and protocols, they're publicly facing, they're on their website, then now we educate everyone exactly, this is where you go when this happens. So now everyone knows exactly where to go to report, very clear. Up until that point, no one knew what to do when things happen. And then when the incident does come in, everyone that's a part of the organization that is responsible for the health and safety of an athlete can respond properly because they've been trained. And then, of course, we're going to look at ways that we can better this. So last year, we're going to look at all of the incidents they had. How did we respond? What was the response time? What rehab did we get? We're looking at all of that information to figure out what are we going to change to make it better next year. It's not about shaming. It's not going to impact what they pay. Mm-hmm. We're only going to help them. And so all of the other resources that they need, like background checks, abuse awareness training, concussion training, they get all of that for free or at cost when they go with us. So that's another big thing, is that when they buy a policy, they get all of these services for free. And these are services that they would have paid.
There is huge.
Exactly.
The alignment, you don't want to claim, they don't want to claim.
And then they're paying for it. So right now, there's an organization paying $20 for a background check and another $10 for abuse awareness training. With us, that's $10. And you just got your background check and you got your abuse awareness training for $10. You just saved $20 a coach. And when you have 10,000 coaches, that's a big ticket item. So that's a part of the cost savings that we have with these organizations, is that they get to look at their risk management program comprehensively. And so, yes, it comes down to dollars and cents. We want to make sure that they can see that.
That's awesome. What do you think? What do you think the future holds? I mean, you can keep expanding on this, but yeah, where do you take it from here?
Well, I think the biggest focus that we have right now, and we're building out an ecosystem to support organizations who are managing risk. And yes, we started with injuries, abuse. One of the bigger things that we're focusing on right now is financial risk. And so some of the bigger issues that we see in youth sports is fraud and embezzlement. Well, we're actually launching a financial services arm of our organization that actually provides a bookkeeping and accounting service at a fraction of the cost that these organizations will have to pay. We want to get them away from using a volunteer treasurer. That volunteer treasurer is the crux of this whole thing. We need to have a third party. And the only reason why youth sports organizations have a volunteer treasurer is because of cost. Like, if I go to a CPA to manage my books, I'm paying $100 an hour, and these organizations can't afford it. We've structured a deal with one of our partners that allow for them to have those same services, monthly reconciliation, ARAP, and does their tax filing for $530 a month. Huge savings for these organizations, but also reducing their financial risk, bringing more transparency to the organization. We are providing really a one-stop shop for these organizations to not only manage their health and safety risk, but also managing their financial risk, which actually makes the organization run better. The kids ultimately have a better experience. And so it's about professionalizing youth sports. And we're now at that stage, back in the day when we all grew up, 80% of sports was recreation. You know, you just went out and you played, and 20% of it was like pay to play competitive. Now it's completely opposite. 80% of youth sports today is pay to play, try out to play. And parents are paying, the average cost for a parent to play sports right now, for a kid to play sports, is $693. That's the average. We got organizations, I got a volleyball club, parents are paying $4,000 a season. And that organization, from how they manage capital, how they manage their resources, how they do bookkeeping and accounting, has to change. They're no longer, you know, mom and pop organizations. They are small businesses. So we're trying to help these organizations manage their organization like a small business, which allows them to operate with better controls and reduce their risk long term. So that's really where we're going. We're building the USAA for youth sports. Yeah. We want to be the USAA for youth sports. We want to help support them with all of their health and safety, their PNC, and commercial insurance needs, and all of their financial needs. And so all of these things are just examples of how we're surrounding that organization with services that are commodities, but we're reducing the margin. If there's an organization making money on commodities in youth sports, we want to kill that space. And our focus is to build more resources and services around that organization, increase our buying power, and then, of course, grow our wallet share per organization.
Fantastic. That's really cool. I'm excited by that. Then, what are you doing for? You haven't played a pro sport in a little while, but you're still getting out. I understand you've been swinging a golf club or two.
That's the thing. That anyone in the insurance industry, at some point, you're going to be on a golf course more than you anticipated, and they've gotten me. And the reason why I love golf so much is because it's every ball sport that I've ever played, I've been somewhat decent at it. Like, I've been above average in some way in terms of my athleticism. This is the one sport I'm terrible at. And I'm like, I got to get good. So I was doing triathlons and stuff.
I can't deal with this. I can't be mediocre at this. I
was like, I got to get good.
Be good at everything.
So I was doing triathlons and everything before this. I traded in my tri-bike for a set of clubs. I think I'm going back in terms of my health, but I love the game. It's hard. And that's what keeps me coming back.
It's hard. I tried it. I just resigned at some point. I'm not going to be a golfer. Thankfully, our head of all our deployments in BizDev, Akine Akwibo, I think you met him at OnRamp.
Yeah.
He's a fantastic golfer. So I call him my designated golfer. It was just last week, one of our investors had something they invited me to, and it would have been fantastic networking. And I'm just like, sending my designated golfer. He didn't mind.
You got a ringer that you send to the scrambles.
Exactly. So that was pretty good. And then I understand you're on the spectating end of football now, and you've gotten even more attached to your home state there, and your new home state of Minnesota, which is my original home state.
I love it.
Watching some things there with the Gophers.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. So I've never had a college team up until this point. Now I'm still a Chicago Bears fan, like diehard, and we haven't been good.
You saw them playing in the rain.
They won
yesterday.
I'm going to take every win I get. It didn't look pretty, but we won. But I'm now a new Gopher.
There's nothing pretty about that game. You see them slip and slide in the end zone.
It was terrible, but I'm going to take every win we can get for sure.
Great.
But I think on the college front, I'm now a Gopher fan. I love what Coach Fleck is doing, the culture, like everything about what that football team has been doing over the course of the past 2 to 3 years. I just like what I'm seeing. And yes, they're playing better and they're playing well. But the culture that he's building, I'm a huge fan of culture and mission, and the way that they're building young men, and the way that they're investing into the kind of the personality and the character of these young men. That's what I love about the program, and that's ultimately why I believe that they're playing better, because they're now being led in a different way. And that's ultimately how I want to lead our organization, is that, yes, the dollars and cents matter, and there's certain KPIs that we're going to focus on hitting. but I want to build an organization that challenges our individuals to be better people. And of course, if they're motivated to be better individuals, they're going to be better. They're going to be better citizens. Of course, they're going to be better employees. And of course, our company is going to be better in that. I think it's directly correlated. So I'm really loving what the Gophers are doing over there on the football side.
Yeah. Oh, me too. I mean, I grew up, they were never good. Every now and then they get good at basketball. I remember they made the Final Four once when I was like in college. It was really cool. But football has always been a dog, and I'm glad to see it come around. Last question then, for anyone watching, listening, what kind of person should pick up the phone, pull out their email, and contact you? What are you hiring for? Who are you looking for?
I think that there's a couple individuals that we'd love to connect with. Number one, we're always looking for reinsurance capacity, specifically on the access space. If you look, access market right now around liability, specifically for abuse, tough market. So would love to connect specifically on the underwriting side, specifically around that. We are raising capacity for that. We're always looking for great people, sales, service. If this mission resonates with you in any way, we want to talk because I think those are the kind of individuals that we want to connect with. And of course, if you're a sports organization, if you're a kid, if you volunteer on a board or anything like that, we want to connect with you. Or you run a fitness club, we want to connect. And so those are really the three areas. I think it's a wide brush of individuals we want to connect with. Super excited to connect with everyone at ITC as well and be on panel with you, Dan. So just really appreciate you having me on again. And thanks for allowing me to tell my story.
Yeah, that'd be great. We're looking forward to seeing you September 20th. And fantastic. It's been great chatting with you. I love the mission. I love what you're up to.
Really appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot.